Talk to me about them squids.
I am continuing to Squid Now Kid now. I have finished the campaign, and I'm happy to report it is like far and away easily the best like main game Splatoon campaign so far of like the three built-in ones.
I'm gonna hop in with you on this because the thing I've been playing this week is Splatoon 3. Lord above, it's a great fucking game.
That campaign, like I don't want to spoil the final boss of that campaign, but it is incredible. Like I could recount to you the sequence of events that leads to you fighting that final boss, and it will be the most ridiculous thing you will ever hear in your life. And it has a moment that you know is coming if you played Splatoon 1 or 2. You know that final boss is going to have a particular song, and you know exactly, even when you're like playing it, you know exactly when that song is going to hit, and when it does, it's still utter magic.
So, like, you text into the group this week about how much you were loving the campaign, and I was like, I'd played like 1 or 2 levels, and I was like, yeah, I mean, it's all right. Like, I've been doing a couple of levels on it, and it seemed like fairly linear. Like, you go to this, you go down this grate, and then you play a level, then you move on. Cool. But it wasn't until, like, you said, no, you guys need to actually plow through with it. And I got through, like, the bottom of the crater in the first area when it really is revealed to you like how much there is to this campaign. I was like, oh. And I was saying to you guys that like Splatoon as a puzzle platformer, it's such a fucking obvious home run. And it's so clever. The little, like, you know, boss battles and all that aside, and how much I think Big Man is like the best character I've seen in months in a game. Fucking love Big Man. Especially because in my head I just always want to put on a Scottish accent on a Big Man every time I think about him. But just the little ideas for making puzzles and making you think about level traversal and things like that they put in this, and I'm still only in the first kind of like world once you get through the crater. Yeah, it's and that's before you even get into that it's still just a great online multiplayer experience, which is not a phrase you will hear me say very often, my friends. But it is.
It's very Mario, you know, in terms of like, we have this idea, we could have built a goddamn game around it, but no, it's one level and we've moved on. It's because like they have levels devoted to nearly all of the specials. Like the grappling hook special, there's like 2 or 3 levels built around. The splashdown special, there's a level built around. The little octo robot thing you get into and shoot, there's a level built around. So like all of the specials have like levels built around them to show off those like skills and mechanics in ways that because like when you pop them in the multiplayer, you get them for, you know, 5-10 seconds tops, so you don't really get to like really delve into what you can do with the grappling hook in the game until they drop you into a level in the single player where it's like, well, this level is entirely built around grapple hooking from point to point, and that could have been a game. Like, that feels so good, it could have been a game, and it's just 2 or 3 levels, and there's so much stuff like that where it's just like that. There is a level in the single player where there's just a giant Easter Island head, and the sole task is to paint it. That's it. It's like, paint the giant Easter Island head. That's it. And there's another where it's like there's a giant stack of boxes on one side and a solid object on the other, and you have to break the boxes to match the object on the other side.
Yeah, I did that one today. I didn't fully, because I'm sort of half paying attention to what's going on, because I'm just like, oh, it's Splatoon, and like the mechanics are going to be simple enough that I'll figure it out. But at first, I just had a whole bunch of boxes in front of me, and I just started smashing into them, and then I was immediately killed. I was like, oh, fuck, right, I should have actually paid attention, because I don't know what this wants me to do now. But it's self-explanatory enough that you figure it out pretty quickly. You mentioned Mario there, and I think specifically it's very Mario 3D World in that, that kind of general idea of like a level is going to have one specific theme or gimmick, but it's going to make the absolute most out of that. And I think like 3D worlds and 3D lands are like the epitome of Mario doing that sort of thing. And I think that's a really, really strong comparison to make. I'm on like the 4th world at the moment, and if I recall, I don't think I actually ever finished the campaign in Splatoon 2. And I feel like, and you might have to correct me if I'm wrong here, but I feel like the campaign in I can't even remember if Splatoon 1 has a campaign, but I feel like they were more like action orientated and didn't like do this sort of thing here where it was, you know, like let's use a specific weapon and build a level around that and how to, you know, make a gimmick out of that, or let's do some sort of like puzzle based thing. I feel like the prior campaigns were more just about like, hey, just go through hordes of enemies. Maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like that's the case because I feel way more engaged with this campaign in a way that, you know, I want to see it through to the end than I did with either of the last two campaigns.
Yeah, because the first Splatoon was very much, it's a tutorial. You know, that it's meant to just teach you the basic mechanics of the game. Here's how you shoot enemies. Here's how you use a weapon XYZ. They only had like 5 level templates that they repeated across the 3 or 4 or 5 worlds, wherever it was. It was like, for what it was a lot of fun, but it was ultimately very simple and straightforward. Splatoon 2 is where they were like, well, we can do a lot more with this. There's a lot of like movement options and cool stuff we can do with these things. Then if you play the Octo expansion in Splatoon 2 is where like they went nuts. It's like, okay, so this is paid DLC, so we know the people that are buying it are like our diehards for the most part. Let's just go crazy and make these weird, hard, like the Octo expansion is really hard, and they just went nuts with the stuff. And like this is very much inspired by the Octo expansion, where it's not quite as hard, though there is one level in the 5th world that I'm so looking forward to Mark getting to, because it's one of those rail levels where you have to shoot all the targets, except there's no checkpoints. So it's like 60 to 90 seconds of just that, and well, that's a lot of fun. But yeah, there's so much creativity across all of those levels that, and I think there's maybe 40 or 50 in the game across all of those, and there's just so much cool stuff. And I said the final boss is like full up there moment of the year for me. It's just it's stupid in the best way, and I loved it so much.
Yeah, I feel like the way it's going with Splatoon, this is probably going to... We don't really have like a category for like, you know, best surprise of the year or something like that, but I had Splatoon 3 pre-ordered and I was looking forward to playing it, but I wasn't really thinking about it. And I think I mentioned last week or maybe the week before that I was kind of worried that I was going to jump back into it and maybe play it for like a week or so, but it was going to go the way of Switch Sports or Mario Strikers. But like between the campaign being way more fulfilling than whatever joke of a single player campaign that Mario Strikers has, you know, I've been jumping back into the multiplayer again, and I feel like I haven't seen all of the levels, and I don't feel like any of the levels I have seen so far have particularly stood out in any way, but it might just be I haven't seen all of them yet. But I've still just enjoyed jumping back into that multiplayer and enjoying for what it is, and it's like, nah, I actually think I'm probably going to stick around with Splatoon for a while, and I was not expecting that a week ago. So yeah, the power of the squid. It's
a great game, and like
it is.
I think that's why they know like they cannot like add some big new shiny thing that's like this is the brand new Splatoon experience, and they can just be like, it's more Splatoon, and you're happy with that because you dive into Turf War and you're like, oh, this rules, and you dive into Salmon Run and you're like, oh, this still rules too, and then you play the entirely new single player and you're like, oh, this is also better than it's ever been, and you're like.
You didn't need to reinvent the wheel. You just needed to, like, you know, polish that sumbitch up. And I understand,
like, it must be a weird game to review because, like, on its merits by itself, 9 out of 10 game, slam dunk, no question. But if you're like, well, compared to the last one, if you played Splatoon 2 and jumped to Splatoon 3, how do you then rate it? And I think that's a difficult question to answer. But also, this game, just on its merits for what it has in its own package, it just kicks ass. Splatoon rules.
God, it is so
again,
good.
Final boss of that, I cannot overstate how like just utter joy that was caused within me by that final boss. And like Splatoon 1 in particular has the moment where Calamari Incantation plays and you basically defeat DJ Octavio through the power of song, and like that set a pretty high bar. This one has like taken that bar and just shoved it astronomically further in the sky. Like I don't know how they can do another single player campaign and top that final boss again.
The one thing I will say in terms of the single player campaign and in terms of the overworld, so for anyone who hasn't played it yet, you're collecting these power eggs each level, and throughout the world you've got these kind of like areas that are covered in this sort of goop that looks very similar to the goop that you would see in Super Mario Sunshine. And you can't...
I was thinking it's kind of like halfway between that and the Ganon Blight in Breath of the Wild. Yeah,
there's a little bit of that as well, yeah. And you can clear these areas individually by, you know, the power eggs that you collect throughout the levels. And perhaps there is a way that if you do the levels in the right order, and you don't fail anything, and you clear these areas in the right order, that you never have to replay a level. But I have found that I've had to grind a little bit, like back with certain levels, like going back, because I don't have enough power eggs to clear the area that I'm in, and that's kind of brought the pace down a little bit in a way where I would have much preferred, like, just that there are a finite amount of eggs that you need to collect that can be collected, and you'll always have enough eggs to clear out the area instead of having to go back and like grind in prior levels. And I wish that it would do something like, because there are balloons in the overworld that you can collect some like extra power eggs and stuff, so that's kind of brought the pace down a little bit for me. That isn't like a deal breaker, but it's frustrating enough that it's the one thing that I found with the game that's annoyed me.
I will say, my absolute hatred of arbitrary roadblocks, but I managed to go through the entire campaign without having to replay a level. I had like 20,000 power eggs left over by the time I beat the campaign. So
did you clear out like the entire areas? Like,
oh yeah, I played every level every time. Like I'm like, I do not want to miss a level of this game because I think they're really good.
Oh, I don't know what the fuck then that's that I'm doing wrong that you figured out, but yeah, you are a better squid than I am.
I've always said that about Garrett, actually.
There is that level in World 5 that I did
squid.
die often enough to end up like farming, I think, about 2,000 power eggs out of it, because I spent like I think the entire campaign I spent like 4.5 hours on, and I spent like 90 minutes to 2 hours on that one level, which, by the way, the word of the wise, you don't have to beat every level. You only have to beat as many levels as to get as many power eggs to advance, but you should beat every level because the levels are great.
Yeah, I want to beat every level.
Yeah.
Oh, I love Splatoon. It's Nintendo's coolest game, and like the Miiverse integration stuff and all the like Queen is Dead jokes and all the fun stuff you get with Splatoon.
It was literally the first thing I saw when I went in there,
because it was like 2 days after the game launch. So what's going to happen? It's going to be a bunch of like surprisingly inclusive, like everyone's welcome here, and haha, the Queen's dead. That's the two things you get from Splatoon.
It is like incredible just how it has become sort of like the inclusive game. It's and like as well it's what, like the best selling game in Japan in God knows how long, sold like 3 million copies
ever.
It's ridiculous.
It is the fastest selling game in the history of Japan. It sold 3.5 million copies in its first weekend. Like, that means Splatoon is a bigger franchise than Animal Crossing. It's a bigger franchise than Monster Hunter. It's a bigger franchise than Pokemon in Japan. That's ludicrous.